given to us another opportunity.
I shepherd boy. Do you hear what I hear? A song high above the trees, with a voice as big as the sea, with a voice as big as the sea. Said the shepherd boy to the mighty king,
chapter 6. We'll start looking at verses 12 through 16 of Luke chapter 6. Luke chapter 6, starting in verse 12, and it came to pass in those days that he went out into a mountain to pray, and continued all night in prayer to God. And when it was day, he called unto him his disciples, and of them he chose 12, whom also he called apostles. Simon, whom he also named Peter, and Andrew his brother, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon called Zelotes, and Judas the brother of James, and Judas Iscariot, which also was the traitor. This morning we move into the next section of Luke, the calling of the 12 apostles. About 3 years ago when we went through this in Mark, we looked extensively into each of these men. Also, probably about 11, 12 years ago, we looked extensively at these men through a Wednesday night stretch. Starting with this morning's message as we begin to look, probably won't do like we did last time, but maybe go at it in a little different way. But we'll begin here with this section, having left off with, in Luke's account, the healing of the man with the withered hand in the synagogue. And having done that on the Sabbath day, which again just added more fuel to the fire as the Pharisees and the scribes are ramping up their hatred of and vindictiveness to try to get rid of Jesus Christ. And it's kind of all reached a high point in Luke's gospel here where we left off last week in that verse 11. They were filled with madness and communed one with another what they might do to Jesus. And then we move into this morning's text, and it just simply goes on and starts, and it came to pass in those days that he went out into a mountain to pray and continued all night in prayer to God. It came to pass in those days, at this certain time. Not as in chronologically, as in this day that followed, like Luke's trying to say that it was on the Monday after this Sabbath day. But in this time that has really ramped up of the fight between the Pharisees and the scribes and the religious elite and Jesus Christ. We're right in the middle of this era where the escalating hostility between Jesus and these elite is really starting to get at its hottest. His death is less than 2 years away, and he is beginning now to prepare a group of people that will carry on his message and carry on the gospel. He's going to choose 12. And when he chooses 12, he doesn't choose any priest. He doesn't choose any Pharisee. He doesn't choose any scribe. He doesn't choose anybody of the religious order or the religious hierarchy of the day, which makes them even madder at him and wanting to get rid of him. This fact that he chooses these 12 people is a judgment on the current corruption at that time of Judaism and of that particular religion and what it should have been and instead what it was. He chooses 12 common men, fishermen, tax collectors, common men. The book that we've used so often in this study, both when we did it 11, 12 years ago and we did it 3 years ago, John MacArthur names them this, and some of you have read the book, 12 ordinary men. Just ordinary men. Some of our people today that grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, we were coming in this morning, and the song came on as we were coming in, and I told Barry, that's pretty appropriate for today. There was a song that was out about 20 years ago, and it said, "There goes my hero. He's ordinary." Just ordinary men. No priests, no religious elite, no politicians, no high-minded, just some fishermen, a tax collector, and then some folks that are so ordinary, we don't even find out what they did for a living. The elite hate Jesus, but he doesn't need them, nor does he want them. In fact, he spends his time calling them out constantly. So instead of them, he chooses these 12 ordinary, common men that really we don't know a lot about. Sure, we know Peter, and we can say we know John probably the best of them. John through his gospel. Peter again, we think Mark's gospel came from Peter. The stories in the Acts of the Apostles that really use them quite a bit. But when you get past those two and you start thinking, and if I ask you today to grab out a piece of paper and close your Bible and write down the 12 disciples, the 12 apostles, the 12 that he calls, I wonder could we all do it? Especially when you get down there later in the list. But these are surely heroes. Very significant men. When you think about these 12 ordinary men and how important in history they really are, it makes this little passage significant. You realize that in New Jerusalem, when the old heaven and earth are passed away, we get over into Revelation 21 and John sees New Jerusalem coming down. It's a walled city surrounded, and it has 12 gates, 3 on each side of a square. And to gain entrance and walk through those gates into New Jerusalem, as you walk through and you look up, you'll see the name of a tribe of Israel. There were 12 tribes of Israel. Each one of those 12 gates will have the name of one of those tribes above you as you walk in. But according to Revelation 21, as you walk in, beneath you will be the foundation stone, and on that foundation stone will be written a name of one of the 12 apostles. Pretty significant men, even though we really don't know as much about them as we ought to. They would become the preachers of the new gospel. They are God's men. Paul gives us a little insight into how or why God would use these kind of people. And I want you to turn to it real quick. Go to 1 Corinthians chapter 1. It's a little bit of a long section. I don't usually do this on Sunday morning, but I'm going to do this morning. I want you to go to 1 Corinthians chapter 1. Go to verse 20 of 1 Corinthians chapter 1. Where is the wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the disputer of this world? Hath not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? Well, that fits into just where we're at in choosing these 12. Just where we're at in the fight against the Pharisees and the scribes and the religious elite. Verse 21, for after that, in the wisdom of God, the world by wisdom knew not God. It pleased God by the foolishness of preaching to save them that believe. Well, preachers don't like this verse very much. Because what we do, foolishness. In the eyes of those Pharisees and scribes, what Jesus was doing was foolishness and was heresy. When in fact what they were doing was heresy. For the Jews require a sign, and the Greeks seek after wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified. Unto the Jews a stumbling block, and unto the Greeks foolishness. But unto them which are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God, and the wisdom of God. Notice what he says. Because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. For you see your calling, brethren, how that not many wise men after the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. But God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. And the base things of the world, and things which are despised, hath God chosen. Yea, and things which are not, to bring to naught things that are. Here's the great purpose in it all, verse 29. That no flesh should glory in his presence. But of whom are ye in Christ Jesus, who of God is made unto us wisdom and righteousness and sanctification and redemption, that according as it is written, he that glorieth, let him glory in the Lord. Jesus would not choose the religious elite and the Pharisees. It was not going to be about man. It was not going to be something that those would be able to stand and say, look what we did. But God chose out just some ordinary old guys. Just some people that those Pharisees and scribes looked down their nose at to come in and be the apostles. Be the sent ones of Jesus to take out the gospel and preach this new message that they didn't understand and would have nothing to do with. So that at the very end, the glory would not be to them, but the glory would be to God. Now, as Jesus is picking them out, as we see here in the text, it's an important decision. You think, well, God's got perfect plans. He does. God had it all planned out. He did. But here we get again that tug between a sovereign God and the choice of men. Yes, Jesus is God, but at this moment, he's fully man as well. And he's going to pick 12 people. At this point, he's got hundreds, possibly thousands, we don't get a number, of disciples already who are following him. Remember, as he's been at places, the crowds have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. Even just a few verses ago, as we get to pushed him off the shore, and he had to get in the boat to teach them all. And these people have begun to follow him. They are disciples. But he's going to pick just a few. And the text says that he's going to choose 12. And so he goes up in the mountain and he prays. And Luke tells us that he continues all night in prayer. So this decision to Jesus was important enough not only just to pray, but to spend all night in prayer. You ever spend all night in prayer to God for something? Some of you have. Some of you know what it's like. Some of you know what it's like to go to sleep praying and to wake up and keep praying and to fall back to sleep and to wake up again and to keep praying and to get up that morning, whatever time of that day may be, and to continue to be in prayer about something. Some of you have had something drive you to that point. Most of the time, as fallen, depraved, sinful human beings, what it takes to drive us to that point is something that's really bad. Something really bad. We usually don't let a decision drive us to that point. But boy, we get flat on our back with a problem and an issue, and we get to be a prayerful person. And I say we because I'm right there with you. I have never in 50. Boy, this hurts my feelings to say. Mom, you sure we didn't get the birth certificate wrong? We'll make changes. It's just a half century. Oh, Lord. Bless us. But never in 50 years have I been as prayerful as I am right now. And that's a shame. When I was deciding, when the deacons asked me to be pastor here 23 years ago, I didn't pray about it near as much as I've been praying right now. And that's a shame. Because that was a much more important decision than anything else I would ever decide. Jesus spent all night in prayer to pick these 12 men. Just a decision. We are so flippant in our lifestyle and our busyness. Again, as we took last Wednesday night to just try to stop and slow down. That we don't take moments to pray about things Here Jesus is all night long. He knew how important it was. He had to pick those 12. You say, well, he only got 11 right. No, he got 12 right.
That's right.
Because there wouldn't be the gospel without the traitor. He had to get the right one. And he got the right one. But he prays all night. Because he's going to pick 12 out of a large group of people. Because the text says he gets up the next morning, he comes down off the mountain, and he brings all of his disciples together. Because there's tons of people that still following him. They're waiting on every breath. They want to hear what he's got to say. They want to see the next miracle. They want to be a part of it. He's going to look out at that group. And he's going to pull 12 men out of that group to be his apostles. So he goes to the Lord in prayer. He goes to God in prayer, being God himself, but also still being fully man. And then he calls out the 12, and as Luke tells at the end of verse 13, whom also he named apostles. Now, we've already met some of these in Luke. We know them all through years of study in Sunday school and vacation Bible school and the preacher preaching and going through them. But in Luke, and where we've been, we've met a few. We met Peter, James, John, Andrew, the fisherman, the two sets of brothers. We met Levi just a few verses ago, Matthew, the tax collector. And here we're going to get the list of the rest. But he picks them, and he makes up this 12. They're going to go from being 12 disciples or 12 followers to 12 leaders. They're going to go from following to being sent out. John tells us this in his gospel. He gives us this quote in these words. He's the only one that quotes Jesus on this. Jesus said, "You have not chosen me, but I have chosen you and ordained you that you should go and bring forth fruit." The new Judaism, the new religion, the new gospel, the new relationship between God and his people, taken out to the people, not by the religious order of priests and Pharisees and scribes, but by these common men. These common men are very significant. They'll sit on thrones over the 12 tribes in the millennial kingdom. They're apostles, which just simply means to be sent forth or to send from. So these are sent ones, sent from Jesus. Jesus has his apostles. The people of the day understand this term. This term actually comes from an Aramaic term, which was the common language among the Jews during this time. And it signified an official representative of somebody that was sent from. The Sanhedrin, the 70 men, the Sanhedrin court, they had what they called apostles, people who were sent out as official representatives of them. We have those in our government today. It was a term they understood. Jesus said, I'm calling my 12, and they're going to be my apostles. They're going to be my official representatives. They're going to be sent out from me in my name. And so it was a title. It meant something. They knew. Today, it's a title for a preacher who thinks he's about something. We got preachers today call themselves apostles.
Yeah.
I wouldn't walk in the door. They got it all wrong.
Wow.
Bless their hearts. Ain't no apostles today. But they were capital A apostles. The true term. They were Jesus' specific representatives. They have dropped off to follow him, and now they will begin to learn of him. Luke will speak of them, and then when we get to Acts, he'll go all over the place with them. But they are being sent out officially from Jesus Christ. They will become the real foundation of the church. Paul writes it this way in Ephesians 2. He says that, and the church is built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone. They will be the foundation of the church. They are why we're here this morning. Yeah. If it weren't for these men, this place would just be a gathering place for something else. Might not have ever been built. Yeah. But because of these men, we can sit here today. Amen. Make no mistake, teaching them and getting them ready is not going to be an easy job for Jesus. He's going to spend the next 2 years. Sometimes he's going to call them out for having little faith. Sometimes he's going to call one of them Satan. Sometimes he's going to tell them that, ask them the question, how long must I suffer you? How many times I got to tell you this? How often we got to cover this? All the way up to the day he dies. He'll be trying to teach them things that they just won't quite understand. But you know what? It gives me hope this morning, knowing that he can use these 12 men. He can use me too.
Right.
Yeah.
He can use you too.
Yeah.
And he is using us. I think about what Paul said in 2 Corinthians. And it makes perfect sense to me. But we have this treasure in earthen vessels. And here it goes. Just like what he said in 1 Corinthians that we read just a moment ago. That the excellency of the power may be of God and not of us. He called those 12 ordinary men so that the bragging wouldn't be about them, but it would be about Jesus. We're going to look a little different, like I said, at it. Lord willing, we'll continue next week as we kind of look at them as a group and a little bit individually. But I want to close with this morning. This is how, I'm going to read you one verse out of Acts and we'll close. This is how they saw them, even after everything's over and Jesus is gone. We get Luke's account in Acts of this. Peter and John having preached and having healed the man at the gate, and now the religious elite and the order are all talking about what's happened and what are they going to do and how are they going to do it. And it says this, now when they saw the boldness of Peter and John, and perceived that they were, this is the word to use, unlearned and ignorant men. Even at that point, the men who would carry on the gospel, who would start the spread of Christianity, the religious higher-ups looked at them and said they are unlearned and ignorant. You ever been called unlearned and ignorant? Not two good terms to be called. They perceived they were unlearned and ignorant men. Said this, they marveled. And they took knowledge of them. And listen to this last phrase. That they had been with Jesus. Don't matter how unlearned and ignorant you are. When you've been with Jesus, it means something.
Yeah, that's right.
And they couldn't deny these two men had been with Jesus. Jesus has picked out these 12 so that for the next 2 years they can be with him. And while they're with him, he'll teach them. He'll prepare them. He'll get them ready at times when they don't even know what he's getting them ready for. To preach the wonderful gospel message of Jesus Christ so that men might be saved and get eternal life. If you sit here this morning saved and headed for heaven, you can be thankful
Yeah.
for this list of 12 guys that Jesus came down off that mountain and called out of that crowd. Amen.
Amen.
Let's stand while Denise gives the first invitation. Open the altar up this morning. If you'd like to come pray this morning,